Vino Geek Podcast, wine from a Kiwi perspective. What does value mean to you? When you see a list for the top 10 best value Sauvignon Blanc in the world, how much would you expect to pay for the top Sauvignon Blanc? This is my issue this week because I don't believe that $41 New Zealand is value. That's what we're talking about today. So yeah, WineSearcher.com released their top 10 Sauvignon Blancs for 2026. While there's a few wine companies, Kiwi wine companies I'd like to congratulate, the fact that the number one Sauvignon Blanc, value Sauvignon Blanc in the world is 41 New Zealand dollars. I don't even know if it's available in New Zealand, but that's by the by. It's 41 New Zealand dollars. Is that how much we're expected to pay for value? This seems crazy to me, given the fact that in New Zealand, you can buy a really well-valued, well-priced, really smart Sauvignon Blanc for $20 to $25 tops. That's what I'd call a really good value. Anything over that, you're talking in the premium category, the big leagues. So this is my little issue with this, is that why has WineSearcher.com allowed this to be their value pick, that it's 41 New Zealand dollars? I understand that, yes, value can come at all prices, but this is Sauvignon Blanc. This is a wine that's made on the cheap, that's made quickly, efficiently, with minimal input from the winemaker, and get it to the market as fast as possible. $41 for a wine that is made like that? What is happening? For me, there's a few things going on. I'm hoping it's not something more sinister and more dark than I'm thinking, but we're going to investigate all of it.
When it comes to travel, experience matters. Book with the A-Team, Amanda and Anna from King Travel. With a combined 25 years in the industry, we'll look after your holiday from start to finish. Join us this August for Adelaide Uncorked, our hosted wine journey with Amanda and Caleb King. Think Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, long lunches and premium tastings. Experiences you'd find hard to access on your own, all in a relaxed, small group with an optional Kangaroo Island add-on. Book local, book with confidence. Go to kingtravel.co.nz.
First, before we do, I would really like to give a shout out to the Kiwi producers that were part of this list. Now, for me, not all of these wines I would consider value. I would put them towards that premium level of Sauvignon Blanc, given that, in New Zealand, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, there's there's probably about half a dozen that sit in that category of the same price point of this Chilean that won top spot, and that sit above that same price point and above. The rest of these sit below, but still they're not far below. I mean, Vavasour and your Tomato Estate, they are the cheapest from here. To me, I can see how they get value. They get a value pick. I mean, but Jules Taylor, really cool to see there, but it's not exactly value. It is still pushing that higher end of 20s, up to $30 a bottle. Same with Craigie Range, Greywacke and Arntsfield Single Vineyard had just pushed over that $30 mark. So is that really value? When we look at what people spend on average on wine, they don't spend on an everyday. For me, value is something you could spend weekly. You could buy a bottle of this weekly, or even a couple of these bottles weekly, not one on an occasion. Because for me, once it pushes that $40 mark, $40 New Zealand, for most people, that's out of their price point. That is a special occasion wine. So that's not value. So the fact that this wine is there, and there's wines that push the level of what I'd consider not an everyday purchasable wine for most people. Why are they considered value? They're really good Sauvignon Blancs, but they're not value. Value to me means the price point. Price point first, not how amazing the wine is. That's great that the wine's amazing, but then score it against the big leagues, put it into the category it should be. A $41 Sauvignon Blanc should not be in the value category. That should be in the premium category. So yeah, let's break this down. I mean, sure, as far as what people spend on wine on average, the average person, in the US, yes, it is a higher price point. But this, compared to the rest of the world, what the rest of the world would spend on average on a bottle of wine. I mean, in New Zealand, $20, that sort of $11 to $12 mark, I suppose, US, is what we'd spend. Pushing any further, and that's not really value for Kiwis. And that's not really value I did a little bit of research on this. It's not really value across the world. Only in the States do they push that $20 mark, to that $20 mark, and slightly above that. But still, who's buying that? Who can afford to spend that much money on wine regularly? It's not the everyday person. And that to me says that the wine isn't value. If you can't buy it every other day, regularly, when you buy wine, if that's not what your budget allows you to buy, for most people, how can that be value? This is the thing, I don't know where Wine Search is getting their stats from, getting their numbers from, getting everything, but it shows a few things. It either shows that the people that use Wine Searcher, it's not getting to the masses. It's getting the higher end few people that have a lot of disposable income. If they can afford to spend that much money on an everyday bottle of wine, if that's value to them, that to me tells me that Wine Searcher isn't a coverall, isn't a good representation of the world of wine drinkers. Is an elitist niche. And you see that in their wines of the week, the wines that they promote. They're all unicorn wines, in my opinion. They're all wines that people, the everyday wine drinker, 80% of wine drinkers are not going to touch because they cannot afford it. It is out of their budget. It is out of their league. So that's my first thought process, is that Wine Searcher isn't targeted at the wine drinker, the bulk of the wine drinking audience. Where personally, I feel like I am trying to be a bridge to the everyday wine drinker. I'm not trying to target the people that know a lot, that drink a lot, that drink high end stuff, because there's plenty of people out there wanting to target you. Cool if you're listening or you're watching or what have you, but if that's all this winesearcher.com, which is a massive online presence, if that's all they're looking to target, they're missing a whole market, and that's scary. That says to me that they don't care. They don't care. They're so worried about their own little bubble and being able to drink these special wines that they don't even want to touch wines under this, because for me, let's be honest, all the wines that are on there aren't really value. If they're priced at that sort of $20 or $25 mark and up, they're not really value. That doesn't scream value to me. And I'd say for most people, that doesn't scream value. I know because for over a decade, I worked in retail and fine wine retail, and the customers, even in fine wine retail, didn't want to spend that much on Sauvignon Blanc. when there was a big jump and there was a massive shift around COVID with the price of Sauvignon Blanc, people balked. People balked at paying what they were buying Astrolabe for $20, and all of a sudden they had to spend $26. They didn't want to do that. They balked at the price increases that hit. So that tells me that the average Sauvignon Blanc drinker does not spend that much money. So why is this considered value? To me, it almost smacks of they have interest in this vineyard and they want to promote it because they stand to gain from it, whether it's whether kickbacks from the winery, whether they actually are shareholders in the winery, what have you. But for a $41 wine to be the number one value pick, it's just crazy. As you can tell, I'm repeating how it's absurd to me that a reputable website, online company like this are so far out of touch with the everyday wine drinker, with the masses. Sure, mine is only a microcosm, but it shows because the majority of Sauvignon Blanc sits in the same price point. There's a reason for that. They have done market research. They have worked out the sweet spot for Sauvignon Blanc. And it's not $30+. That is not the sweet spot for Sauvignon Blanc. The sweet spot for Sauvignon Blanc is around that $25 mark. Is it because these people get so caught up in the premium wines because that's what they get to see, that's what they get to show off, that's what they want to show off, that's what they live and breathe for, is these super premium wines, and that's all they're drinking, so they don't see that. So is that why $41 is the top value wine? You've got to wonder. I mean, sure, I would say the wine will be excellent. It'll be delicious. If you're going to spend $41 on a Sauvignon Blanc, you want it to be outstanding. But when you're spending that much, there's a whole league of Sauvignon Blanc that you open yourself up to. Premium Sauvignon Blanc. New Zealand, their premium Sauvignon Blanc. Premium Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand very rarely goes over $40. There's a handful. The rest of them sit under that $40 mark, and they are outstanding. Where were they? They aren't featured here. Sure, there's Grey Wacky and Arntsfield, which are top-end sort of wine Sauvignon Blanc producers, but where's Dog Point? Where's Mahi, their single vineyard? Where is the Sauvignon Blanc I'm going to be talking about as the wine of the week? Whereas, you've got the Tomato Estate. Where's the Tomato Cape Crest, which still fits into this price point? Where are all of these wines? Where are all of these premium Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc that sit still below or just around that price point that top value Sauvignon Blanc sits at? Where are all the best of New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs? They aren't represented in here. Sure, there's a very, very good Sauvignon Blanc, but it is not a snapshot of the best. Where are all the rest? What happened to them? Why did they not feature? What is going on? If you price someone at $41 Kiwi or $24 American, you consider that value. Where are all these other wines that are premium Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand? Where are they featured in this list?
When it comes to travel, experience matters. Book with the A-Team, Amanda and Anna from King Travel. With a combined 25 years in the industry, we'll look after your holiday from start to finish. Join us this August for Adelaide Uncorked, our hosted wine journey with Amanda and Caleb King. Think Barossa Valley, McLaren Vale, long lunches and premium tastings. Experiences you'd find hard to access on your own, all in a relaxed, small group with an optional Kangaroo Island add-on. Book local, book with confidence. Go to kingtravel.co.nz.
Okay. Now for the wine of the week. This week, we're going a little bit left of centre. I recently had Rockburn wines come to see me at Lionel's, and I picked their Sauvignon Blanc, or as they call it, their Fumé Blanc, their 2024 Fumé Blanc to be exact. And this sits only at $32. You can pick it up from Whiskey and More online. So yeah, well below the $41 standard for the top tier. And as you can imagine, Fumé Blanc, for those of you who do know a little bit about wine, you'll realize that this is barrel fermented. This is treated a little bit special. So it is their best. It is as high quality as you're going to get, and it's only $32. This is why I picked this, because it is a premium Sauvignon Blanc. So, deeply coloured, but it's very much in that light straw colour. So, yeah. By the way, as I said, I tasted this at another stage, so I'm not doing a live tasting either. I'm just rereading my notes. So yeah. So as I said, light straw, but very deeply coloured. So very saturated, but that deep straw. The nose was gravelly and stony with a core of green stone fruit, citrus, and then a lovely little fresh pea pod. So again, on the nose, you didn't really notice that any oak or oak work as such, more a little bit of sort of that sulfide from fermentation, the stony, gravelly note. On the palate, it was rich and mouth-filling with ripe lemon and lovely line and minerality coming through, and just, again, ripe acid, producing this beautiful, long and balanced finish. A complete wine. And this is, when I've talked about other Sauvignon Blancs that I've reviewed, they're missing this element, this complexing element of the barrel fermentation in the palate. They're missing that richer, fuller, rounder, smoother, longer palate, that you get from time in barrel, that oxidative sort of time on lees, and just to build that texture, build that body. But given that it's Sauvignon Blanc, it's always freshness that pervades. So you still get that freshness, but you get that body and texture. As far as, this is a wine that you can quite happily cellar for a while. Don't be afraid to cellar a wine with this much freshness, because it has been barrel fermented. It is made to age. It's not made to just drink. Now, while you can, it's not made like that. Really good with food. So think richer textural foods, richer, fuller body, like a winter seafood, winter white meat dishes, your roast chickens, happy days, This can complement that rich, salty sort of food, you can get really crazy with this. You can get really cool and do really cool things with a wine like this, because it's made for food, As far as a score, for me, I really, really like this wine. I love Sauvignon Blanc that has barrel, that barrel element, because it just gives it more, And for this, a 95 out of 100, easy, great wine, really, really well worth picking up. And whilst I haven't tried this $41 Chilean wine, this is really worth it. Would I consider it value? No, because to me, that's a price point it's too high for value. So yeah, that's my rant, if you like. There is value out there. There is so much. And just ask the Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc drinker. Your typical Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc drinker will point you in a direction of a plethora of outstanding value Sauvignon Blanc. And if the ballpark is to $41, that basically covers 95% of Kiwi Sauvignon Blanc. So, yeah, it's a strange metric that you end up with a $41 wine being your best value for a category. Strange metric, really, really strange. And I'd love to understand how they came up with that, and they didn't send alarm bells to say, "Oh, well, that's not really value." You know, I'd love to know from Wine Searcher how they decided that that was still value for money, that didn't just instantly take it out of the running, because $41 is a lot of money for a Sauvignon Blanc. You know, I would love to know. You know, if anybody can help me understand how that wine is the number one value pick in the world this year, I'd love to know. So yeah, that's all we have this week. Yeah, thank you as always for joining us. Santé Borak.